it's certainly something important. Remind me to get to it at the end, okay? Make sure I don't forget. So thank you very much for the kind introduction, Charles. It's been a long but rather exhilarating day. I was sweating, literally sitting right here, watching Rosen's presentation. I'm still sweating. It was like, wow, this is phenomenal. Not just the pace of change, but the speed and the breadth of change that's coming to WestJet. And change is never easy, as a few leaders alluded to earlier in the day. Everyone wants to go to heaven, nobody wants to die. What I'm going to share with you today is the power of storytelling and how we can make this change easier through storytelling and make this change a reality through storytelling. So first, I'll start with a story about myself. I believe there are 4 kinds of people in the world. There are the optimists who see the glass half full. There are the pessimists who see the glass half empty. There are the realists who just take the glass and sip the water and don't really think much about it. And then there are people like me and many of you who've got jet fuel in the veins and just love planes and the sound of it. And seriously, I checked in at Radisson at 12:35 a.m. last night. I opened the curtains and, whoa, the runway is right here. Okay, I really need to sleep, but come on, at least a couple of aircraft movements. And I was watching until about 1 a.m. You just got this plane stuff in your veins. You just cannot get over it. We call ourselves AV geeks on Twitter. And that's been me for as long as I think. But I have a technology background, and I used to work at an MIT startup in Boston in enterprise search, like as hardcore tech as it gets. And then 10 years ago, I decided to take the plunge. I left my job, and I started a blog called Simply Flying, and I started blogging thrice a week on airlines and branding, the 2 sort of interests of mine. And then social media came along, and slowly but surely, we went along, and lo and behold, in the last 10 years, we've worked with 84 airlines and airports globally, specifically on aviation and marketing. The big guys like Emirates and Lufthansa in Singapore, to really small ones that many of you might have not heard of, like Smart Aviation in Egypt, or SpiceJet, or Air Baltic, which, by the way, is the world's most punctual airline right now, if you want to benchmark. And it's been a fantastic journey. And what I did was I took all of this and I tried to summarize in a book, which I will share a bit more about later. So before I actually dive into the actual storytelling bit and cases of different airlines and how they do this stuff, let me share with you a story. The story is that of a rose. Okay? I'm just going to come down here a little. I was having lunch with the CEO of a large European airline about 3-4 months ago in London, and I asked him, so Alex, you're the CEO of this really large airline, one of the top 20 largest airlines in the world. What keeps you up at night? And he said, Shashank, it is about a rose. I said, what? He says, yeah, in our first-class lavatories, we've got a fresh stock of rose. My bean counters tell me that if I take it away, my commercial team tells me if I take it away, I will save $1.5 million a year right off the bat. That's a lot of roses, because they do have first class in a lot of their cabins as well. But what I don't know is if I keep it there, then does the first class passenger notice it? Does the first class passenger take it out to smell it? Does the first class passenger become more loyal to me just because I have the rose? I don't really know what the impact of the rose is. So this question is keeping me up at night. What would you do? And I'm like, oh, wait, like take the rose out or keep it? He says, yeah, well, what would you do? So I'm going to put you guys in my shoes right now. So pick up your phone and go to that voting app you've got, and let's do a quick vote. Will you keep the rose in the lavatories, in the first class labs, or will you take it away and, whoa, that's pretty quick, and take it away and save $1.5 million a year? Let's see where we are at. Come on, don't give me a 50-50. Seriously? Welcome to WestJet. All right, Greg, you got your answer. All right. So at WestJet, I'm sure this will not be a question that's asked very often. But this was certainly not the answer that he was expecting. But the thing is, it is important to know that here I am telling you not whether the airline saved $1.5 million or not, but here I am telling you the story about a rose, because stories spread, statistics seldom do. And that's something to keep in mind as you go on an expansion plan, because most airline employees are not like you, not like the 13,000 of you. When they go to a bar and someone says, I have an airline story, they cringe and they hide. Most WestJetters will go, is it about WestJet? Yeah, tell me about it. I work with the WestJet. Right? It's completely different. Most airline people are like, oh, wait, you have an airline story? Sure, I got to go run to the lab. It's different because stories spread, statistics seldom do. But before we go into the how, I think it's important to understand why. Now, Charles just mentioned that I last met him in Halifax. This is a photo of my daughter, Sana, who's 3, on her flight to Halifax. And it's important to know, why do we fly? And the answer was on this flight from Toronto to Halifax that we took. And she's flown a lot of times, but this was the first time she actually could realize she's flying. And she knew what was going on. So the flight takes off, and she's like, Dad, we're taller than the CN Tower, look. I was like, yeah, we are. Dad, I can see the whole of Lake Ontario. I was like, yeah, Dad, we're about to land in Halifax. Yeah, she was excited for the 2.5 hours. She had these stickers. She was pasting them on. There's a full story going on. For the full flight, we did take the stickers on at the end of it. But for her, this flight was magical. When Greg, as a kid, used to fly from Montreal to Saskatchewan on those Viscounts and stare out of those big windows as a kid, looking down, it was magical. When Oliver and Wilbur Wright, no matter what Warren Buffett says, when Oliver and Wilbur Wright took off for the first time at Kitty Hawk, they did not know that they were about to bring magic in our lives. When you launched that WestJet Encore flight to Nanaimo for the first time, and there was this lady who came running and hugging a WestJetter, I don't recall who, but she hugged a WestJetter and she cried and she said, thank you so much because I can finally fly my kid to Disneyland. That was magical. Flying is magical. Travel is magical. And at the back of our minds, we need to keep that in the head and in the heart, that whatever we do, we've got to ensure that flying remains magical. That's the premise I want to start with as I share with you some stories on how airlines do stuff. So last year, actually 2 years ago, I said, you know what, we've been doing this for 8 years. Let's try to synthesize what great airline brands do right. And that's what led to my book, Soar, in which I interviewed executives from 8 different airlines to figure out what is it exactly they do right, such that they become brand leaders in the markets that they operate in. There are big and famous airlines like Singapore and Southwest, but then many others like Finnair and Kulula, not many of you know about. So I'd love to share a few stories with you, because what I learned was an airline is either remarkable or invisible. There is no good enough. If you get someone from point A to point B on time safely, you are actually forgettable. To be remarkable, you got to do something above and beyond that people talk about. And that's what storytelling is about. Can you give them stories to remark about? Great airline brands strive to be remarkable and not just good enough. And that's what I saw from the product that was launched. So, how do airlines soar? Let's start with Finland. So, I've got a question. Where does Finnair put 80% of its long-haul capacity? Where in the world does Finnair fly to more than anywhere else? Indeed, it is the Far East. Up to 80% of Finnair's long-haul capacity is to the Far East. It's to cities like Xi'an and Chongqing and Tokyo and Seoul. It's to China, Japan, and Korea. Who would have thought that an airline from Finland and its largest market is not Russia, not the UK, not Finland, but the Far East? Finnair markets itself as the fastest way to fly to Europe from the Far East because you fly right over Helsinki if you're to fly nonstop. Everything else needs some sort of backtracking. So given that that's their largest market, given also that nobody in Finland typically speaks Mandarin on a regular basis, nobody in China typically speaks English or Russian or Finnish on a regular basis, how do you even begin to communicate with the largest customer base that you have to fly? Finnair struggled with this for a bit, and then they found an answer. And their answer was design. Who here has heard of Marimekko? A few of you? OK, who's heard of IKEA? Great. Where is IKEA from? Sweden, thank you. Just like that, Marimekko is associated with Finland, especially in the Far East. Marimekko is a very aspirational brand, sort of like a BMW or a Tesla of cars. And the Japanese and the Chinese hope to one day own a Marimekko duvet or a Marimekko teapot like this one. So Finnair decided to partner with Marimekko to bring Finland to the world using a language that people already were familiar with. People knew Marimekko, but not Finnair, right? So what they have is on board, they have Marimekko teapots, Marimekko cutlery, Marimekko pillowcases, Marimekko duvets. You walk on the plane, and as a Chinese person walking on for the first time, you go like, OK, what all can I steal? In fact, their pillow covers are the most stolen items on board the plane. They've not started branding it like Virgin does, but they really do get stolen. In fact, it's not just Marimekko cutlery and stuff. They go a step beyond. Not only do they hire, let's say on Japanese routes, Japanese-speaking flight attendants, they actually partnered with Marimekko to design kimonos for Finnish flight attendants. So imagine you are boarding this unknown airline which you sorted by price, hence you bought the ticket, and you're boarding this airline, you don't even know where Finland is, let's say, for the first time, and you're like, whoa, you're wearing kimonos, and you're serving sushi, and you got chopsticks. Nice. And you speak Japanese. Instant familiarity, right? You are speaking their language right there. And it's very, very important to customize to the culture. And who can tell me which is the oldest airline in China? Finnair is right now the largest European airline in China, which is the first European airline to fly to China. Any guesses? Any guesses? KLM, thank you. Just raise your hand, KLM. I'll pass you a book later, OK? Remember. KLM was the first airline to fly in China, but Finnair is the largest. For 25 years, KLM did not realize something. KLM in China was perceived as a brand of milk. If you think about it, KLM's logo with the blue and the dots and stuff looks like Parmalat's logo. Parmalat was the largest foreign milk brand in China at that time, and the only thing they thought was, wait, who would fly a brand of milk? And for 20 years, KLM did not know that until a station manager told them, you know, my family feels this way. And then they're like, oh, is there some meat to this? Let's investigate this further. And then they did some studies and figured out. So it's very, very important to build those market perceptions as well and to customize for your audience and adapt culturally. KitKat. KitKat, when it went to Japan, had to introduce KitKat sushi. No, seriously, this is very expensive, and you have to line up for it for an hour to get KitKat sushi. The one on the left is cherry blossom KitKat. The one in the center is oolong tea KitKat. And the one on the right is wasabi KitKat. I'm not joking. This is KitKat sushi. KitKat doesn't just sell their milk chocolates in Japan. This is what they sell. Cherry blossom KitKat is the most popular KitKat in Japan. You have to adapt culturally. You cannot just bring your same self and expect everyone to accept you as you are. You have to customize. You got to keep the core the same, yes, but you still have to customize. And that's the key. The question for you is, how will WestJet take its promise to Asia when you do fly there? I'm not saying you're flying there, no forward statements here, but when you do end up there, because the 787 can reach there, just by the way, how will you customize your own offerings? It's important to think about it. It's very, very important. The next example, for the next one, I'm going to take you literally my own flight path. When I was doing interviews for SOAR, I was in January, I flew from Ottawa to Helsinki, and it was colder than Ottawa in Helsinki. And my next flight took me to Auckland, New Zealand, from -35 to +35 degrees Celsius on the same day. And I went to Air New Zealand, which is in the book as well. Now, what is Air New Zealand known for? Sorry? Hot towels? That too. I'm thinking whether I got one. What else is Air New Zealand known for? Safety videos. Thank you, Sky Scouts as well. Safety videos indeed. But Air New Zealand wasn't always like that. This naked man started it all for Air New Zealand. So I'll give you the context. Back in the 2008s, 2009s, and Ed, please correct me if I'm off on the dates, Air New Zealand was facing a huge amount of traffic, a huge amount of competition from low-cost airlines like Jetstar and Virgin Blue, and all these guys were just nibbling away at their market share. So they said, you know what? We don't have hidden fee, and that's why our fares are higher. Let us just be transparent about it. So they went about it in their own very Kiwi way, being very cheeky. They said, you know what? We're going to have pilots in body paint because we have nothing to hide. They did this as a full-page newspaper advertisement which said, our low fares have nothing to hide. They followed this up with a video as well, and this was the first video that came out.
Sunday dreamers in a blast, fixing holes and sunken fast, and please don't blame me for my lies, just to keep him by my side. And I don't mind if Papa cares, even if my mama stares. Step right in, look right through. I beg you get to think the way I do. And I got you, I got you under my skin. I got you over my grin. I got you under my skin.
At Air New Zealand, our fares have nothing to hide, which is why the price you pay includes everything up front.
Do you love a man in uniform?
I'm not saying you do that. I'm not even barely suggesting that. But they realized that when they posted this up on YouTube back in the day when they were authentic viral videos, this video did go viral. In fact, I put this up on simpliflying.com back in 2009, March, I think it came out, and our site went down because of this video. And they said, hey, you know what? We've stumbled onto something here. 3 months later, they were going to come up with a new safety video. And they said, why don't we do that safety video in body paint anyway? I was like, OK, let's do that. So then the next video was a safety video in body paint. And you can actually go on YouTube and see the making of that video. The CEO features in there in body paint as well. Now, they put the safety video on their screens, but they soon realized that in the first year, more people watched that safety video on YouTube than the number of people who flew Air New Zealand. They're like, whoa, people did not even previously watch safety videos on board. And now they're watching it on board and on YouTube. I think we've stumbled upon something here, something really big. And they took that into their stride. And since that day, Air New Zealand has released 3 to 4 safety videos every single year. Hit after hit after hit. Air New Zealand owns safety videos. In fact, when I was landing in Auckland, you can't read, you can't be on your phone, you can't be on your laptop, and unfortunately, my book was packed up in the overhead bin. So I was going through the IFE, and I realized Air New Zealand specials. Watch all our safety videos. Like, what? They actually have a playlist on their IFE of 14 safety videos, and I watched all 14 of them while landing. I can do a full safety demo for you right now in a Kiwi accent as well. Not as good as Ed's. And so Air New Zealand really owns safety video because good storytelling helps you own a category. So who can tell me here, what category does WestJet own? Christmas, oh, nice. In unison, that's right, indeed. When I do this presentation at a conference or at other airlines, this is usually a 20-minute section on how WestJet came to own Christmas. Because everyone in the world wants to learn what you did. I don't think they have a clue. But it wasn't always like that for Air New Zealand, and that's very important to know. It was around 9/11, when Air New Zealand was facing really tough times. They owned ANZ, which went bankrupt within 3 years of 9/11, and then Air New Zealand faced huge bankruptcy. There was a government bailout, and they had to go through this whole journey of resurrection. It took almost 8 to 10 years before they became these digital media darlings they are today. It was a journey. Change is hard. And in fact, Air New Zealand is changing right now. Air New Zealand has just bought the largest number of electric cars in the Southern Hemisphere. Why would an airline be buying electric cars? I mean, not for ramp agents, not for ramp, but they're starting to think the next level, like, hey, you know what? People come to New Zealand on Air New Zealand, and then they want to go from Queensland to Christchurch. If we own this network of autonomous electric cars, how can we do that? They are already thinking of the next level. Change is constant. In fact, really glad to see Alfredo and the Chief Digital Officer, but here's a reality check. Can anyone guess how many people Air Canada is hiring for its digital team right now? 78. 78. That's the number of people they're hiring. So the field is always moving, and you have to be constantly changing. So own a category, know what you own, but be prepared for the change, because it's going to be a constant thing. You cannot just stay fixated to what you've become, because what got you here may not get you there. Very important to note. My next example, let's go to Turkey. Turkish Airlines has an inspired in-flight product. Who's flown Turkish here? A few more hands again. It seems like equal number of people who've flown Turkish and Finnair in the house. Turkish Airlines has an inspired in-flight product, and specifically I refer to the meal. These days when I fly Turkish Airlines, I fly them for the meal as much as for anything else. It's a 6-course dinner in business class, and a very nice meal in economy class as well. Every person in economy class, by the way, gets an amenity kit as well, branded. But here's a feature. A trolley rolls out with flickering candle lights. Of course, no flame is allowed, so there are LED candle lights with paper cups. They're placed on your table, and then a chef comes out and starts serving you. And it's actually quite magical to have a chef pour sugar powder on top of a souffle as you're trying to not fall asleep at midnight. But it was magical. This was my flight from Montreal to Istanbul, and it was just beautiful, the way it was served, the way it was plated. And I was like, this is really fine dining in the air. You carry on. This is my daughter meeting the first ever chef in her life in the Bassinet. It was a great experience. But what I realized was when I was speaking to Dr. Tamil Kotil, their former CEO, a very humble man, and he was passionately sharing with me about the food service that they design and why they want to bring the Turkish food to the world. It's delicious, by the way, the kebabs and stuff, before anyone even lands in Istanbul. I said, that's fantastic. And he said, we don't want people to be distracted. And I said, what do you mean you don't want people to be distracted? He asked me, Shashank, do you remember what else you did on the flight? I said, no, I ate and I slept. He says, exactly, that's by design. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm really not getting this. He says, well, our meal service is typically the longest in the airline world. It can last for almost 2.5 hours. You can go for your quick business meal, but it can last up to 2.5 hours because the chef is literally preparing the meal for you. They've got all these microwave ovens and stuff like that. But to ensure that nobody takes the focus off the meal, do you know what they did? they removed duty-free. There are no duty-free shopping carts on Turkish Airlines. There is no duty-free shopping available at all. They said, we took out duty-free shopping so that people are not distracted from the food. Turkish Airlines clearly wants us to remember their food, and they've taken every distraction away just so that we focus on the food. So my question to you is, what is it that WestJet will choose not to do? It is just as important. You cannot be doing everything. You cannot be everything to everyone. It's hard. You will tire yourself out. So what is it that you will choose not to do? Very, very important. Okay? And finally, I want to share the example of an airline which I'm sure you're all extremely familiar with. Your good friends down south of the border, Southwest. This is a picture I took when I was at the Southwest headquarters, which was a very, very funny thing for me, by the way. So I was waiting to interview Herb Kelleher, and I was obviously starstruck even before he walked in his car, and he was smoking a cigarette as always. And he walks in. It's the first time I'm meeting him, okay? He walks in with Colleen Barrett, and he comes in, and it's gregarious, and he comes, and I thought, okay, shake hand, like, what do I do? And he comes, like he's about to give me a bear hug. He comes and hugs me and gives me a kiss. And I'm like, okay, I really don't know how to respond. And the comms lady is like, it's okay, that's normal. And I was like, all right, this is normal. In Southwest, it's all about love and heart and people and employees, and this comes through in their marketing as well. It's very important because recently, if you recall, they released their new livery, their new designs on the planes, and here's how they did it. Very different from what other airlines do.
Ready? We take them off on 3? 1, 2, 3.
Oh, wow. Wow, that looks
Awesome.
fresh.
I like it.
Wow. I love it. It's bold, it's fresh, it's new, it's saying we're coming out.
Well, no doubt it's Southwest because it has the name up there really big. That is cool. It's an awesome experience today, and one of the things that I was really concerned about was the red belly, but when I laid down on the ground and looked up at the heart that's underneath there, that made me proud. So, the heart under the belly. It's very simple, and it's Southwest.
I thought it was incredible, just so much modern compared to the old scheme and the Southwest, the bold lettering and stuff. I think it looks great. I think it stands out. I mean, you're not gonna miss it.
Right there. Perfect.
The thing that stood out to me most today is when we took off our blindfolds and just how fresh and clean and modern and just how beautiful the new aircraft and colors are.
It's innovative, sexy with all the metallic in it, and I just love the heart that we stay centered to who we are as a company, although we are evolving into something greater, bigger, and better, but we're still at the heart of things, so I just love that. 1, 2, 3, Southwest!
This was the video that they released to their staff and publicly to launch their new livery. There were no bloggers, there was no fam trip, there was no sneak preview for employees first and press later, none of the traditional stuff. They literally brought their staff, their most important people in the company, blindfolded them and videoed and recorded their reactions. Simple. And that was all their marketing, that was their unveil of the new livery. It shows how employees are at the center of Southwest. Employees are the center of everything that they do. Another picture of a wall that I took when I was at the headquarters there, and I believe these are values that you relate to very well as well. But this is something that comes through in every single thing that Southwest does, and they have been consistent about it as well. So there's a dichotomy here. While you got to adapt, there are other things you got to stay focused and stay the same. And that's something you need to think about and really decide what will change and what will not, because good stories reflect your values. And the questions which I think we were trying to answer earlier in the slides that Ed was sharing. Which values do you want to take global? Which values do you leave behind? What is it that will take you to the next stage? Because that, again, will be different from what brought you here. So I learned some very interesting lessons. And again, I did not have time to go through every single airline in the book, but drop me an email and I'll send you the other case studies as well. There are five keys to great storytelling that I'll summarize with, okay? The first is you got to adapt for culture. So how did Finnair adapt? What did they do? Finnair partnered with Marimekko. Thank you. So they adapted for culture, the Japanese and the Asian culture. The second thing is own a category. What does Air New Zealand own? Safety videos. WestJet owns Christmas. You might want to own Chinese New Year when you get over there. You think about it, okay? You got to know who you are not. What did Turkish Airlines decide not to do? No duty free, no shopping on board, right? And this is, by the way, it's not universal. It's just completely different from what other airlines do. For example, when Korean Air was designing their new A380s, it's the only one with a boutique at the back of the plane. There's no lounge, there's a shopping boutique. You can go shop. There's a shop at the back of the A380 because Koreans love to shop. It's the #1 reason why they miss their flights, by the way. A hint in case you're thinking of flying to Korea. So you got to know who you are not. It's very important. Tell me, who's the hero at Virgin Atlantic? Branson, thank you. Who's the hero at Singapore Airlines? The Singapore girl, that's right, thank you. Who's the hero at Ryanair? Okay, villain. Michael O'Leary, right? You got to have a hero. I'm not saying you appoint a brand ambassador, but you got to have a hero because people relate to individuals. They relate to brand personalities. AirAsia has Tony Fernandez, right? But look at AirAsia and Singapore Airlines. One is indeed a person, and then there's the Singapore girl. You will never, ever remember the name of a Singapore girl, but you will remember you were served in a very consistent manner by the Singapore girl. And it's down to their training. They have the world's longest training program for flight attendants, which delivers that consistency. What do you do about heroes? I don't think you have a mascot yet. Not yet, and I'm not saying you do it, but I think you've got something going here. This magically appeared on my LinkedIn last week, out of nowhere. This is John Davies from Salesforce who's saying, pretty cool when WestJet CEO Greg Saretsky is on your flight, does the welcome announcements both in English and French, and then takes his seat back in economy. Do you remember this, Greg? Was this last week or a couple of weeks back? Last week. And update. And then he went on to do the food and beverage service for the entire cabin as well. I'm not saying Greg is the only hero here, but every one of you who does the grooming and the service, you are the heroes. Can we, elevate that another level and build it into a brand personality of sorts that people relate to? Perhaps you're onto something here, right? It's already ingrained. People are already talking about your heroes, but it's not an individual, it's a culture right here. So you got to have a hero. I would like to propose that amongst all your senior level hires, you open up a position for a chief storyteller. Brands need a personality. Airline brands especially are guilty of being faceless entities. Aviation brands in general. If I'm to say, hey, I want to go speak to someone at Calgary Airport, who do I speak to? I've just walked in, I want to speak to someone at Calgary Airport. Like someone who represents the airport, not the information desk lady. It's really hard to find a chief storyteller. It's really hard to find a personality who embodies the brand. The role of a chief storyteller is very interesting. It's a combination of the traditional marketing and communications role. The chief storyteller brings out the essence of what your brand is about and shares it internally and externally through stories on a regular basis. Microsoft has a chief storyteller. Barack Obama had a chief storyteller. And you can see the difference, yeah? Trump versus Obama, just in terms of storytelling. And there are other brands as well. Nike has a chief storyteller. Box, the startup, has a chief storyteller. And you should see how these brands form emotional connections. Chief storytellers can help you do that and tell the story in a very different manner. In a manner, Smart Car does it, and I'm just going to show you exactly how.
Smart.
What's the point here? What is the point here? Do not go fight on their turf. Really, do not go fight on their turf. Over the last 20, 22 years, you've built something great. Know what makes you great and bring them to your turf. And that's what good challenger brands do. You got to know what you stand for and really resist the urge to go over there because they're just waiting. They're waiting for you to come to their turf and compare yourself to the same metrics that they was themselves with and compare themselves with. Don't do that. Can you get a metric for humanity, for example? Can any airline beat you at it? I don't think so. Bhutan has gross national happiness. Come on. Can any country even come and compare? So what would WestJet do? Think like the Smart Car. Think about the stories you need to tell. That sort of brings me to the close. I hope you can see the power of storytelling right there. It's very, very important to tell stories because they spread, and that's what people remark about. That's what makes you remarkable, isn't it? That's exactly what makes you remarkable. And there were lots of other examples I wanted to include here. I couldn't. Drop me an email, and I'll send you the larger, bigger presentation. Thank you very much. What's in the trunk? Thank you. Almost forgot. What's in the trunk? Let's actually open it, OK? We don't need the Undertaker music anymore. So the first thing in the trunk is the rose. So the airline actually took the rose out. They did. It was a large legacy airline. They took it out. All right. What else is in the trunk? The Kit Kat that did not make it to Japan. OK? I'm going to throw it to table 42 there. Give a really nice, good catch, almost. It's a Kit Kat. Come on. And finally, there is the WestJet 737. What does it represent? Well, it actually represents everything that you've been till date, from 1996 till today. It's the essence of who you've been, where you revolutionized travel, brought it from 18% of Canadians to almost 50% of Canadians traveling. It's been a phenomenal job. You democratized travel with this. But the important thing is that this may not necessarily lead you to the future. This totally represents your past and your present, but not necessarily your future. And the rest of the box is actually empty. There's nothing else in the box. But sitting here today, actually last night on my flight, this is an actual WestJet napkin, as you can see. The WestJet Connect was not working, so this is all I had to entertain myself from Toronto last night. But it got me thinking. So I wrote something interesting that I wanted to share with you. And you can tweet that. It's not how well you play the game that matters. It's deciding what game you want to play. You're grooming the plane. You're helping one another out, not thinking that someone's told you to do it or because it's your, you just do it because it's a collective responsibility. And that's what makes you truly Canadian. It's the humility amongst WestJetters that I see that makes you so unique. And I would say that this box is that humility. Keep that intact and fill it up with new stuff that people will tell stories about. Thank you very much.